All right, we're going to talk about making some really simple clay press molds. I've gathered some things from around the house, and basically you're just going to cut a pretty thick chunk off your clay. This takes a lot of clay, so don't be too worried about using it, but also we need to be, a little bit concerned with using too much clay. But then I kind of stamped it out a little flatter, so it's a little thinner. It's still better than an inch for sure. So clay press molds, this is really a conversation about space. How does this little Humvee Matchbox car occupy space, right? And is it kind of worth making a mold out of? So this is positive material, right? There is some negative space in this one, like the windows are open and such. But I'm going to be pushing these into clay, so I'm going to be creating the negative of this, right? So the really cool thing about clay is it is positive material or positive space that's malleable. So it can make negative space solid, if you get what I'm saying, in kind of a weird way. So some things I like to check off. Okay, I'm thinking about how these things exist in space. Does the piece have some textural qualities to it? Like if I look at this lemon, right? This lemon has really great textural qualities. So the mold is kind of worth making. If I'm just going to make a mold of a smooth round marble, I could just roll a ball of clay. Why even make a mold? Also, there's like pattern and line and shape on some of these things. I was looking at this thing of string, like this would be worth making a mold of. There's a lot of like detail here. So these are kind of like the details. And then overall, if we're gonna make a clay press mold of something, we want the press mold to be deep enough so that there is actual form present, all right? So I'm kind of checking these things off because I don't want you to make molds that are of things that are just kind of like easier to make by hand than to make a mold of. So how do you do this? Well, you can just take this and press it into the clay. Now, obviously, if you press it too far or press it too hard or push the clay around it, it's going to want to get stuck. You could press it this way. You could press it this way. This way, it's probably going to get stuck around the wheels. I might go for like kind of a 3/4 angle here. I'm just going to press this in there, kind of wiggle it as I go. It's tricky because you don't want the clay to be too wet, but you don't want it to be too hard or else you won't get any information. Wiggling it as I press down. Now I've really got it in there. Notice I'm not pushing against the clay. I'm just underneath this tire to try to pry it out. There, it popped out. Now I don't even want to touch that or mess with that. I'm just going to leave it. Now this one with the windows being open and such, you might... Sometimes you can use some plastic wrap and that will kind of help it release, and it will also cure things like holes for windows. So I'm going to push this one straight in sideways. That might be a little deep. It might be hard for me to even get clay out of there. So there, I pulled that out. That came out really easy with the plastic wrap. I think I might have gone too deep on that one. Meaning when I try to use that mold and push clay in there, I'm never going to be able to get the clay out. So I'm going to try one more of these. Just a little less intense, a little less deep. But if I don't go as deep, then I'm not going to have as much volume or as much form, right? So kind of better this way or better that way kind of thing. Now here's an interesting, right? All the lines and details with this pen, it would be hard to make this pen, but ultimately half of this pen pushed into a mold isn't going to have a lot of form. But it might be an interesting mold. It's just kind of slight, right? There's not a lot of form with it. I'm going to try this string. That's hard to push in there. Probably never quite get it halfway down. I might really work on it. I might even have to stand on it, right? Put it down on the ground and just stand on it. Push the clay around it a little bit to get some of that side detail. And that'll be interesting to see if it, oh yeah, it came out nicely. Okay, so as you can see, I've got this block of clay now that has all of this negative space, right? So it is the negative space that surrounds all those objects that I've just recorded. So now I want to put this in not a direct sun space, but a space that's going to have some light and warmth so they will dry. The other thing that I want to do too is I can cut these each into their individual pieces. So I've got the one Humvee Matchbox car here. I've got, this is of the other Humvee. So I'll leave those two together. That was that kind of 3/4 push. And then actually I'm going to trim around this string because I don't want to waste clay, right? You need it to be robust, but you don't want to waste clay. So there's a little bit of clay I saved there. This one really wants to stick. All right, so I have these 3 nice, simple clay press molds. We talked about positive and negative space. We talked about the objects having some sort of detail oriented with them. So there's the reason that you're making the mold, because there's some detail. We also talked about the pieces being substantial enough in form. In other words, we don't want to just make texture molds. We want to make molds where when you pull clay out of this mold after it dries a bit and we use it as a mold, that you actually have a bit of an object that we can work with. All right.